and seizes the opportunity to play the hero. However, his dream of becoming a hero is quickly dashed when Arthur simply shouts for the student council president. Nicholas is caught off guard and starts looking around, trying to figure out where the president is. Meanwhile, Elijah is complaining about how Arthur just ruined his perfect moment to be the hero, when suddenly, Arthur is yanked by that bastard Nicholas, who's annoyed by Arthur's antics. Arthur tries to keep cool and reminds the bully that discrimination isn't a good thing. Besides, the duel was over long before that. Eventually, Nicholas shoves Arthur away and walks off, muttering insults under his breath. Arthur doesn't mind the insults and starts walking off when, out of the blue, Sylvie does something completely unexpected. She literally spits on the guy's neck as he walks away. Well, that does it. This is enough to make Nicholas, who was basically a ticking time bomb, finally erupt. But once again, Arthur stays cool and points to his little buddy, claiming that it's this little furball who did it. Before the bastard can start his bullying again, the student council walks into the scene. Yes, guys, it's the student council, the most powerful faction, more formidable than anything in the anime world, whether it's the government or the mafia. While the vice president of the student council is outlining all the regulations regarding discipline and discrimination, Tessia's mind is elsewhere, thinking about Arthur. She hadn't been able to spot him in the sea of students during the speech, which makes her wonder if he might have skipped it altogether. But she clearly remembers that Director Goodsky mentioned he was already at the school. Now her mind is spinning with scenarios about how to act when she finally sees him for the first time. Should she play it cool or be more friendly? And what if he's the one who finds her first? All these thoughts weigh her down, and just as she gets lost in her own musings, the vice president snaps her out of it, asking if she's feeling unwell, and offers to cancel the remaining meetings for the day. But Tessia quickly brushes it off, saying she's totally fine. That's when her eyes catch something unexpected. It's Arthur. Noticing the direction of her gaze, the vice president also looks over and starts explaining. That's Nicholas from House Dryle. He's one of the more promising students who joined last year. The red-haired boy next to Nicholas seems to be a first year. The vice president adds that he doesn't recognize him from any of the noble family's prospective student parties, so he must be a commoner. Lilia, another member of the council, also spots Arthur. When both Tessia and Lilia see how rowdy Nicholas is getting, their first thought is the same. This student might actually die if he ends up pissing Arthur off. To prevent things from escalating, Tessia steps in and questions Nicholas directly, asking if he really dares to draw his abilities. The guy quickly switches to defense mode, claiming it's all a misunderstanding. He insists that he simply accepted a duel from Bronze Boar when this first year rudely interrupted. Arthur also notices Tessia and casually waves at her, but before he can say anything, Lilia interrupts and questions him about what actually happened. Seeing this, Tessia turns to Lilia and asks if she knows him. Lilia doesn't hesitate to reveal that Arthur's father has worked for her family for several years, so they've been friends for a long time. Arthur further clarifies to Tessia that he and Lilia have been living together for a while now. While Arthur is just trying to clarify things, Tessia finds herself getting even more confused. She just can't wrap her head around the idea of them living together. And now, a flood of questions and doubts starts clouding her mind. The vice president turns to Nicholas, asking about the meaning behind his antics. He reminds Nicholas that even if he was interrupted, that doesn't give him an excuse to pull a weapon on any student. Nicholas quickly tries to defend himself, claiming he just wanted to scare the other student off and never intended to actually harm him. Although the vice president is annoyed by such a lousy excuse, he decides to let it slide. However, the president herself doesn't agree that Nicholas's actions should go unaddressed. As far as she's concerned, pointing a weapon at someone outside of a sanctioned duel is a clear violation of school rules. She firmly reminds him of the rules, stating that even threatening someone with a weapon is enough to warrant suspension. And if he ever laid a hand on someone, expulsion would be the least of his worries. With a commanding tone, she questions him again, demanding to know if he dared to act recklessly. Seeing no way out of the mess, Nicholas finally owns up to his mistake and quickly offers an apology for acting rashly out of anger towards Arthur. Arthur acts nonchalantly, not bothering to respond to Nicholas's apology. Tessia steps in and reminds Nicholas that his actions will be reported, but for now, he's allowed to leave. The rest of the cowards with ill intentions start retreating, not wanting to get caught up in more trouble. Tessia then turns to Arthur, questioning why he's starting fights on the very first day of school. As far as she recalls, her grandfather had told her Arthur was trying to keep a low profile, but beating up a senior is hardly something that could go unnoticed. Arthur is visibly disappointed to see how she is taking this matter so lightly. He reminds her that she's judging him based on just 5 seconds of what she saw, and insists that he never intended to fight in the first place. Tessia doesn't back down, making it clear that it doesn't matter who started the issue. He should have kept the consequences in mind that could have followed if the situation had escalated further. Arthur stands his ground and clarifies that Nicholas was about to seriously injure that poor student, If Arthur hadn't intervened to distract Nicholas, that student would have been dealing with far worse than just a few injuries. Seeing how Arthur is getting so serious about the situation, Elijah tries to snap him out of it. He tells his friend to let it go since the president isn't entirely wrong either. With all the frustration caused by the people around him, Arthur has had enough and starts walking away from the scene. Seeing how rudely Arthur is acting, the vice president quickly stops him and throws an insult, questioning if he was raised in a barn. My guy, however, just lets out a heavy sigh, clearly fed up with people always putting their filthy hands over his shoulder. This naturally pisses Clive off even more. But before the poor guy can react, Arthur releases a heavy pressure that makes everyone around him cower. Before anyone can make sense of what's happening, Clive is sent flying into the air, only to come crashing down butt first onto the solid ground. Lilia quickly rushes over to Clive, who's sprawled on the ground, and checks if he's okay. Arthur is seriously sick of everyone around him and simply walks off. Even Tessia doesn't have the courage to stop him. Later that day, as dusk settles, Tessia is inside her dorm room building, banging her head against the wall in frustration after messing up so badly. She's both frustrated and embarrassed with herself. All she had been trying to do was help Arthur avoid trouble. If he got into trouble, he'd lose access to the library and training facility privileges, something she thought he'd value. But she realizes she shouldn't have been so biased in her judgment. After all, Arthur wasn't the one holding a weapon in the first place. Though, let's be real, Arthur himself is basically a weapon. But currently, this fiasco is the least of her concerns right now. Most importantly, why the hell did Arthur end up living with Lilia? Her irritation only grows as she blames it all on Director Goodsky. If not for Goodsky making her the student council president, she wouldn't have had to deal with all this fairness nonsense. She could have just reunited with Arthur like an old friend, without all the formalities and pressure. But now, everything's ruined. Suddenly, a knock on the door pulls her out of her thoughts. It's Clive on the other side of the door. He just wanted to check on her since she seemed a bit drained after their earlier encounter with that first-year student. The lady doesn't bother opening the door and simply tells Clive that she's fine. As Clive walks away from her door, her mind remains stuck on Arthur. What makes her situation worse is that damn guy has somehow gotten even more good-looking, making him even harder for her to resist. Now that she thinks about it, she becomes convinced that countless girls in the academy must be hitting on him by now. This realization only fuels her panic, and she ends up letting out a scream so loud it grabs Clive's attention as he quietly walks away. Meanwhile, we catch up with our boys, who have just arrived back at their dorm room. Elijah can't help but ask Arthur why he got so worked up earlier, pointing out that it's pretty rare for him to get that irritated. Now that Arthur thinks about it, he realizes that what Tessia said wasn't entirely wrong. Whatever the case, he decides to shove all the gloomy thoughts aside. What's done is done, and there's no point dwelling on it. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. When Arthur opens it, it's none other than Director Goodsky herself. Elijah is completely shocked, unable to believe that Director Goodsky is standing right there in person to meet Arthur. The poor guy starts bowing frantically, overwhelmed by the honor of meeting the director so up close. Goodsky acknowledges Elijah, even sharing that he's been on her radar and that she's heard great things about him already. While Elijah is practically glowing from the praise, Arthur casually invites the director inside. Once they're alone, Goodsky reminds Arthur that she had already told him to call her Cynthia, but Arthur, in his usual style, blatantly refuses. Cynthia then notices the seal Arthur is wearing and senses only wind and earth attribute mana. She is quite intrigued to see that he is trying to hide his other two elements. Though she also can't help but feel a bit disappointed, she was secretly hoping to flaunt him as her little quadruple elemental protege. Shifting the topic to school life, Arthur remembers that there's something else he needs her help with. Apparently, he wants to take higher-level mana theory classes, especially ones focused on deviance. Cynthia nods and remarks that it wouldn't be too difficult to arrange, but she's curious. She thought one of Arthur's main reasons for enrolling at the academy so late was to blend in with his peers. Arthur quickly clarifies that he plans to take these advanced classes on top of the normal ones with students his age. He's just feeling a bit impatient to learn more about deviant mana manipulation since he's hit a ceiling in that area recently. Anyhow, Cynthia promises Arthur that she'll make it happen. She even mentions that she can arrange for him to observe mock battles between the top upper-class mages if he's interested. As Arthur is about to ask her more about it, Elijah suddenly shows up with tea in hand. Cynthia takes the moment to question both of them about their awareness of the student council's implications. You see, if the student council is what you'd call the shield of this school, then this year, she has decided to create the swords. She wastes no time getting to the point. She wants Arthur to join the disciplinary committee. Naturally, this catches Arthur off guard, but Cynthia clearly has her reasons for suggesting this. She points to the incident he witnessed earlier that day, explaining that the disciplinary committee will be responsible for maintaining peace and enforcing the rules within the academy grounds. Arthur isn't so sure about this idea. He wonders if it's even appropriate for a first-year student to be part of such a committee. Besides, he isn't even a battle mage. But Cynthia shuts down any further objections by reminding him that it's her school, and so, her rules apply. Arthur can only sigh in response. For now, he decides he'll just stick to teaching himself from the books in the library. But Cynthia quickly reminds Arthur that those books aren't accessible to underclassmen. Even for upperclassmen, you'd need to prove that you're a deviant to get your hands on them, something Arthur can't exactly do right now. As Arthur fumes, the woman just laughs in that sly, snake-like way of hers. Poor Elijah, meanwhile, is left wondering why the hell the director is acting like an old friend with Arthur. Cynthia then proceeds to clarify that the disciplinary committee members were chosen specifically for their strength. Joining would give Arthur access to peers he could spar with regularly and learn from. To sweeten the deal, she'll even throw in access to a private training facility. Cynthia even reveals that while selecting strong candidates for the disciplinary committee, she specifically declined Lucas, despite House Wykes explicitly requesting it. It's all clear to Arthur up until this point, but he lets her know one thing, that the training facility better be one of those mana-rich ones. Cynthia promptly uses her wind magic and tosses a gift box at him. Before leaving, she casually mentions that she's already taken the liberty of getting his disciplinary committee uniform tailored for him. As Arthur stares at the uniform, he feels quite annoyed at how she had already predicted he would accept the job. Before stepping out, Cynthia pauses to bring up another important matter. She advises Arthur to make up with the student council president Tessia. It's not good to stay mad at a childhood friend after all. And that does it. That little revelation is more than enough to leave Elijah completely petrified, cracking under the weight of his jealousy. Later that day, Arthur apologizes to his friend for keeping his relationship with Tessia a secret. Elijah, on the other hand, remembers that he too has a childhood friend. Her name is Helgarth, but she's not someone he'd ever want to date. She's far from a lovely girl. What really annoys Elijah, though, is how Arthur seems to be connected with every notable girl around. First Lilia, then Princess Catheln, and now even Princess Tessia. The way things are going, Elijah jokes that it won't be long before Arthur's next target will be the gods themselves. Arthur, of course, responds by reminding his jealous virgin friend that he's never flirted with anyone. This only makes Elijah more jealous, because it means Arthur must be some sort of chick magnet, attracting all the hotties with his irresistible pheromones. Arthur suddenly notices something odd. Students at one particular table seem to be glaring at them with not-so-friendly intentions. And it's not just the students at that table. Everyone around them seems to be eyeing Arthur with interest, some even ogling him. It looks like the rumor about Arthur being a disciplinary committee member has already spread. But all these contemptuous glares don't bother Arthur. He's just basking in the glory of how famous he's gotten. Anyway, they kick back and have some lunch. But suddenly a group of students approaches Elijah. The one leading the charge is Charles Ravenpour, the second heir of the famous Ravenpour house. He's sure that everyone has heard of his family name. Apparently this guy's here to recruit Elijah into his group, thinking Elijah shouldn't be hanging around with lowlifes like Arthur. Elijah, however, pretends to mishear the family name as Ravenpoop, and snickers along with his friend, remarking that he's never heard of a noble family named after bird feces. Naturally, Charles is pissed to see them trashing his family name, and he throws Elijah's plate of food to the side. He's furious that someone's trying to look down on a noble, but Elijah stands his ground, making it clear that he won't tolerate anyone tarnishing or looking down on his friend. As the two continue to exchange words, Charles decides to throw a punch at Arthur to show just how pathetic he thinks Arthur's existence is. Little does this bastard know he's putting his hand in the lion's jaw, and as